this wasn't going to be live.
Let's move. You can stay, kind of. So, this isn't a podcast, but it is a podcast, I feel.
Okay.
I think I wanted to just sit down, do a quick overview of, we're going to do either scouting talk or we're going to talk about the films.
Either one. Scouting's fine.
Okay. Just like a 10-minute, what we got going on, what we're doing tactically. Dave and I have a lot of deer hunter type topic discussions that we're like, man, that would have been a pretty good podcast. So this is going to be our first run of it. Hopefully they get better and they improve. Stop messing around. You're going to mess up the audio. We clearly look like pros here. Anyways, so let's talk about it. The calendar just hit February. When you look at the month of February, clearly scouting comes to mind. What are you looking at to do here in the next 30 days as far as the whitetail hunter that you know is going to lead you to be successful next year?
You're asking me?
Yeah, you.
So I'm going to definitely scout when I can. That's a big problem with us with having lives and having families and whatnot. You can't get out all the time, but when you do, you got to make it worth your while. So you got to kind of have a plan, which we like to kind of map out where we're going to be scouting and which ones are half days, which ones are full days, type of things. We always try to map that out. I feel like we go into scouting season pretty organized, at least the two of us do, as far as like how many times we want to get into certain pieces. We talk about that quite frequently, just as far as, you know, we might know one piece really well. We've been in there a lot of times, but like we want to go check out this one spot, shore up a stand or site or two here and there, double check to make sure an area was hot this past year, just kind of do some finishing touches on some pieces. But then we also got areas that we want to dive bomb a handful of scouts into.
Well, I think, you know, if you look at it, you and I have discussed a particular piece, a piece of Big Woods we want to kind of tackle together. So if I'm free and you're not, that's not something I'm going to go dive into. But you've mentioned you kind of want to shore up some things in what I call your home turf. Oh, it's a place you've been hunting for a while. You got good experience there. The caliber buck there is there we're after. Give me a percentage. Like, okay, new pieces. If you get five scouts, because you, like you said, you're limited to weekends because you know you're not taking time off right now, and you're not you can't get out after work just due to daylight. What are you looking at percentage wise?
Yeah, if I got like 5 good, like, you know, we'll say 5 to 7 hour scouts like that. If I get like a good chunk of a window, if I got 5 of those, I'm probably going to sink. I would say at least 3, maybe 4 of those into a completely new area, and then one of those days I'll probably split up into going to a couple of the spots I know a little bit better. That, like I said, I've been hunting for a long time, just to shore up a couple things, just to kind of make sure. You know, I got a couple areas that are like normally kind of typical buck bedding areas. You know, where they're either fine actual beds or just kind of like a bedding area in general that's normally tore up with rubs. Got some deep woods, scrapes. You know, like central hub scrapes, things like that. I just want to kind of double check those things, make sure everything's going good. Make sure somebody didn't move in you know, late November and cut in 4-wheeler trails, you know, which we've seen, or just something crazy. Just make sure everything's good to go for next year. Yeah.
Local pressure is something I feel like we see a lot of. I had a piece I was hunting past a couple years, stashed 2 cameras in this location and saw the old man walking the road, and then I picked him up on trail camera after pulling those pieces. But it was a good piece. But that year, I think that old guy either retired or knew somebody living on the road, because I literally saw him walking the road with his crossbow. And don't get me wrong, he's got a right to be there, but that piece probably isn't as highly valuable now if he's going to be in there, because he's in on my trail camera. He was in there squirrel hunting, early squirrel season, like September 1st, mid squirrel season, the day before opener scouting and then a handful of times in bow season. So it's just like, that piece used to be pretty decent, and now I'm going to look in that state forest for other areas.
Yeah, and if you didn't actually see him, like if you would have went in there this winter scouting, the sign and stuff, I'm almost guaranteeing is not there like it usually is.
Sure.
Because some new guy, like you said, has been pressuring the crap out of it, you know. So, you know, like I said, just a couple touch-up scouts in some of our more commonly known areas, just to make sure things are still going good and looking good, or they're not, and then, then I gotta adjust from there.
Now, you said, you got to shore some of these things up like scrapes and stuff like that. You're pulling out your maps, you're taking those notes. Something I find is, we've discussed this over the last couple of years, when you find that tree, leaving a detailed description, like it's the triple trunk next to the cedar, or there's 2 beeches, pick the maple that's behind them, or, extra details. And definitely with scrapes, I know I've been guilty in the past of either marking the scrape but not the exact tree, and sometimes it's really nice for camera inventory.
Yeah. Mark scrapes now in like February, so then you can go back, say maybe late April, early May, and put a camera out on those scrapes, and that you either want to just leave for the season or you want to just leave because bucks, deer in general, will still pass by those scrapes.
We're talking the big
all
ones,
summer,
not the yay basketball round
on
ones.
like
hammer ones, the size of this table, you know.
And then but then even then, just mark those scrape sites either to put a camera on later date. We're probably not going to put cameras on scrapes in February, but we'll put them on them. We'll let them run over scrapes all summer. We'll let them run, or sometimes we mark a scrape that we won't put a camera on until summer. Like we'll go in for like a late summer camera pool on an area, and then shift cameras from there to the scrapes. So just mark those scrapes, be detailed with it. Mark your trees, mark exact trees. Don't just like mark a stand site as like a general location. Pick an exact tree, mark it, be very detailed on your notes, because whether you use an Onyx or hunt stand, neither one of them are extremely detailed on like pinpoint locations. It'll get you in a general area, but you need to mark, like you said, specific features like the tree behind the triple trunk tree, things like that. That way, when you're going in the dark, you should be, able to find it, which, that's
in
kind
the
of
dark.
a big deal.
Yeah, in the dark, notes are very helpful. Obviously, you can make better calls if it's an evening hunt or a mid-morning shift.
And then now the foliage is all gone, so it's going to be even more difficult come season when there's foliage down, because you're not going to be able to see as well as you can now. And take that into account when you scout. If you find a tree and you say, okay, here's a tree I want to be in, you got to take into account all the little tiny, leafless, like honeysuckle and stuff that's down now, because come season, that's going to have stuff on it. And honeysuckle, for example, holds leaves extremely late into season, so you just got to take into account that it's going to be a lot thicker than you think. It might look clear, and it won't be ever.
Now, something I find, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is when I'm scouting here in the winter, and just like a new piece I was in the other day, I've hunted the area, but I was in a very new section, and I found some stuff I definitely want to either hunt or scout the perimeters to maybe dive in and hunt next fall. But I found my kill locations, right, because I just kind of stumble across them and you mark them and stuff, but half the time I feel like it's not a terrible idea to then map your access route. And I feel like the other day I just got my kill locations, but I don't have the best way in there, assuming I'm going to have north winds or westerly winds on those days, just due to the terrain. It's bluff country, big woods. I need to avoid where I think, those bedding areas are, and there's some stuff that's just not passable, or it's steeper in one area. The creek crossing is better down there. I feel like sometimes a repeat or I'm going to, if you're scouting an area and you've got some new pins marked, it's not a terrible idea to pop back in there, even if you just go halfway, just to figure out your route. Even where you park your car. Sometimes, I feel like half some of these battles are driving the roads in what I'll call like, the bigger pieces, and marking where you can park a car, because sometimes that's a huge step. Yeah.
Yeah, and then, like I said, finding the access. I mean, just like some like I talked about earlier about the finishing touches on some of these pieces. A lot of that can be, you have a good area, but you want to find a better way to get in there without disturbing as much as possible. So a lot of that, go back, re-scout in order to map the best access to the spot that you found during your scouting trip. So we might go somewhere brand new, find a few spots, spend a whole day there and find a handful of spots. But then we might literally just have to plan another trip back to the same area to find out what's the best way to access it on certain winds, Is there a secondary access point where we can park and walk the road a half mile to kind of come in from the backside, different things like that. A lot of those can be dialed in on the second time back in there to a spot. Just to short things up a little bit. There's always a way you can make a spot better, and a lot of that's because of your access or finding a better tree or making that 20-yard move. Because you might have a good area and there's sign everywhere, and you've seen deer there in the past, but usually
you got to fine tune sometimes.
Yeah, exactly, and a lot of that's access.
And it can change if a tree falls on the trail the deer tend to be using.
Yeah,
they may shift. Even 20 yards. And sometimes you don't know that until you've poked around a little bit and you can see a freshly fallen tree.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back, that kind of leads into e-scouting.
I was just going to ask you about e-scouting. We've talked a little bit. How much are you e-scouting right now? Whether that be a weekend, during the week. For example, the day before I scouted last weekend, I spent probably an hour on Friday night going through the couple main pieces I hunt.
Yeah. I don't necessarily plan my e-scouting. I might just get a bug in my ear to look at something real quick on a map, and then I'll end up sitting there looking at it. Podcasts do
that to me, man.
Yeah, and then I'll end up sitting there looking at it for an hour, and I'm like, I've been looking at these maps for an hour trying to find. But then, so if it's a new piece, e-scout first. You're looking
What's the first thing you look at when you're e-scouting a new piece, like that piece we're going to go check out here this month?
The first thing is going to be access. Because
You're
we're going
really
to try
good
to
at
find
that, yeah.
spots that don't have the access, or the access is difficult. Just to right off the bat,
you're not
just
drinking
avoid
any beers.
Just to right off the bat, avoid other hunters with access.
Okay, I feel like I do an okay job of that. I look also at habitat features.
Yeah,
and
that's only secondary, but first thing.
Access. And when you say access, what do you mean? Not only are you looking at parking lots, but tell me, hit me with some.
Yeah, well, you got access for the dicky mows, which would be the parking lot, and then they're going to branch off of that parking lot like a flower. But you also got access that you can use or utilize better than your average Joe. So access for yourself may be in where a piece of public touches the road. Or, all the road frontage isn't always bad on public because deer will travel alongside the roads. But, like you said, you might come in from the parking lot, and if you loop around and come back to the road, you can be close to the road. But that can be access that you can use as well. So you're looking for access from the parking lots, for the dicky mows. You're looking for access for yourself. Then you're looking for access from multiple roads around. If you got a hill straight off of the main access or straight off of the road, I mean, that's a huge deterrent for a lot of people. If you can go up and over two hills and not have any access at all on the backside, I mean, that's a home run almost. If you got to go up, down, up,
Oh, if you got to go down and up.
Yeah.
If you got to make two moves, I feel like that separates a lot of people. Hell, there's spots, and it's not so much that it separates people from being able to walk that far.
Yeah.
But a lot of people will not pull bucks or deer. Dragging even 100-pound deer is no easy task for one man. So if the road is high, you traditionally got to go down and back up, and you separate yourself from a lot.
Yeah.
If you go two hills over, forget it. You're in the 90% club. Want to ask you too about hiker trails or easements. Some of these wildlife areas do have hiker trails, or the DNR puts a lawnmower or a tractor path through locations that we can walk forever on an access road, and so can the dicky mows.
Exactly, that's another thing. Yeah, you look same thing with looking at parking lots. You look at a lot of the trails are mapped out on Onyx and stuff.
Yeah, they got the dashes.
Dots. Some of them do, or you can just look up the actual pieces. Park trail map if you want to as well. Mm-hmm. Kind of overlay, but so trying to get distance from those as well, because like you said, people will, especially now that some of this public land hunting and DIY hunting is becoming huge. It's becoming extremely popular. People will walk really far on a path.
Even in the dicky mow, in my upcoming film, I've got a shot of a dude in a summit climber. I was in that piece a solid mile. I had kind of still hunted my way in, and it probably took me 2 hours standing sticks on my back. But you're talking a solid 35-minute walk.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of up down, so it's not too much terrain. But that Dickie mode decided to get down 20, 30 minutes early.
Yeah.
Like before dark, if you will. Like when deer are most active. And bottom line, like he's a Dickie mode. He's not going to kill the biggest buck in the area, but he's walking that far.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, especially now with the mobile systems becoming more and more popular and the saddles becoming more and more popular, you're going to get a lot of people that are going to be deep in the woods, more and more now than ever. And, it's just another one of those things. You're scouting, you're obviously looking for deer sign, but you're also looking for just ways to get away from the pressure at the same time. At the same time you're scouting, you're looking at all that, because we might find a decent spot. We might find some real hot signs scouting and stuff like that, but we're like, well, yeah, but there's that 2-track is like right up there. There could be a guy in here. And so, some we kind of like write that area off as just like, yeah, it might have some sign, but we're just assuming it's nighttime because it's so close to where the pressure could be. Mm-hmm. And then just with that, those big X marks though on the map, those are huge too. At times I've even drawn X's on some of the apps where you can draw on, because once you eliminating, especially if you eliminating big acreage
is huge.
Yeah, because then it really keys down your hot spots, and then you can work within those and then find spots within the spot.
I was talking to you the other day. You gave me a phone call and you said, "Hey, how was your scout?" And I said, "Okay, I seen some turkeys, some deer sign." But I said it was a really good scout in the aspect I probably walked for about 4 hours, and I only marked, I'll say, 3 tree stand locations. And I said it was because I was literally walking miles, and there were some trails, but like it was like, boom, there's the deer sign. Here's 3 or 5 buck rubs within 30 yards. Then it leads to an area of consistent deer shit, browsing pressure. It was like these pockets, and not true I was in the big woods, and that's something I feel like I've really evolved in my scouting, is when I walk the big woods, I'm walking until I have a reason to stop.
Yeah.
And it's just like, then when I hit the wall, if you will, there's like 5 to 6 piles of shit like within 20 yards. And then if I'm doing these little loops, these loops are we'll call it 50 by 100 yards, and there's like multiple piles of shit all over, good trails, the browse is there, the habitat's there. I see why and true, I am looking for bedding areas.
Yeah.
But I literally walked for 45 minutes before I even looked. I was like, oh, this is starting to get a little good. Like, habitat's here. I saw a couple buck rubs. Came around the corner. Here's 5 rubs on the edge of a clear cut. And yes, I was walking towards that cut. I kind of knew that was there. But then I had a creek crossing. Like 3 or 4 features came together with bedding, with browse. A terrain feature, came together. Yeah. And so, boom, that's where I'm dropping that pin. It was really nice, though, to know nothing else I had walked was worth a damn.
Yeah, if you're seeing sign everywhere, that makes
it's almost worse.
It's hard hunting, because it's just hard to narrow them down. Just like hunting an area that has a great oak year. When the acorns drop like crazy, one year, it's really tough to find the deer like early season, because they're just everywhere. It's the same way, if you got deer sign everywhere, it's really tough to narrow down where they're at.
Yeah.
But I'll backtrack. You said you were heading to that clear cut because you knew it was there, so you were kind of heading there to scout. That goes back to the e-scouting, because after we mark our access spots, we're going to mark. So we're going to sit on the map. We're going to look at the maps, and we're going to mark maybe if we're planning on putting in a full day scout. I'll say like a 5 to 8 hour scout. We will maybe have 5 to 10 areas marked or pins dropped, like certain locations where it's like transitions of habitat away from the roads, away from the access, etc. But we have anywhere from 5 to 10 areas in a, let's say, 1,000-acre piece that we want to check. That's the goal in mind. Like, we have it mapped out. We're not just going to park at the parking lot and just kind of
Oh, what are we doing today?
Into the woods. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to, we have some areas
Missions
that we're
in
heading
mind.
to. Now, obviously, you might see stuff on the way. You might, get to one of those areas that you find and spend 2 hours there because you're just kind of, you find some sign and you want to just figure out that spot. It's like too much sign here to leave. Let's figure the spot out. Find out, find a couple different stand sites within this bedding area for different winds. Like you almost see you go out there scouting for a day and you're like, oh, I want to cover all this ground. But like, if you find sign and you say, okay, here's a good tree, and you leave, you're just doing yourself an injustice because you need to figure that spot out while you're there. Fully.
You may not even see it until November next year.
Yeah.
I found a spot, and I think this kind of, like talks about the evolution of scouting and figuring stuff out. I said, Dave, I found some rut spots and maybe one late October spot.
Yeah.
Because it was a very good travel corridor pinch. It was a terrain feature pinch, but there was bedding on one side, bedding on another. Bunch of buck sign in the general area, but like I know those are probably bedding up here. There's a fence that runs on the private plus a terrain feature, so I've got like 2-ish funnels. I've got a fence crossing plus a terrain feature. Like that's a rut spot that maybe I sit 3 days.
Yeah.
In November every week, or 3 in a row. Like I don't care. Like that spot's going to produce.
Yeah, and in the rut, we normally don't set the same area more than once, but in the rut it's a little different because you're almost trying to kill that buck the first time he goes through there.
Yeah.
You don't really expect him to be just going through there every single day. So, you just try to, plus, they're kind of doing some dumb things in the rut. If a doe comes through and on that, because it's a train features, so you might get a hot doe come through.
Yeah, doe can drag him.
5 bucks that day if a hot doe came through there.
Yeah, if a hot doe is in one of those bedding areas, because I'm right in between 2 of them.
Yeah.
I'm going to see the buck train. Now, just to back up a little bit, something I feel like I've done in the past, been very guilty when I was kind of trying to evolve, and then this isn't terribly far, 6-7 years ago, I felt like I was trying to scout here. Now, I feel like let me look at 3 to 4 pieces of public, and let me just really focus. I have my 2 main pieces that I hunt, and then I'm kind of dabbling. That third is kind of like my wild card. And I think it's important to have multiple because I had a buddy, Josh Profit.
Yeah.
He got EHD in his area, and 80% of his good bucks are not living. They died. And so he was kind of hurting this year. Versus you and I feel like in our state, we have 2 or 3 like core bigger areas that we know, but you don't want to spread yourself too thin.
Yeah, you don't want to like half-ass scout.
6 pieces. Yeah, that doesn't do you good. No. Knowing, I feel like 2 to 3, maybe even 4 really well. Joe,
it takes a few years,
Oh,
I've been in. There's a few pieces that I've been in over 10 years. There's a few pieces I've been in probably 5 now, and a few places I've been in, let's say 2 years. But so now, like, I don't need to spend that time scouting those pieces. So we have them in our back pocket. Like they said, they need some of those touch-up scouts. But like you said, if something went down in one of our main, few pieces, I mean, we have these other areas that we've scouted, but we're not going to just, we're not, the list is still kind of short. Until you really get to know a piece, don't branch out and like half-ass have 10, 12 pieces that you've scouted or are scouting or you plan to hunt. Have like 5. And sometimes you never even hunt number 4 or 5 in a whole season.
Let's talk about
if your numbers 1, 2, and 3 are looking good.
Talk about distance that it is to get to a piece,
yeah.
And let's also talk about we've got pieces that are closer in distance, but if you look at number of bucks over 130, gonna throw that number out there, they don't have. There may be 1.
Yeah.
Versus if we drive further, you tend to get more.
Yeah, and then that's where like some of your lesser pieces get some of your after work hunts because they're closer.
Or the Sunday evening, you don't want to. You should be hunting, but you've got a shitty Monday coming. You're gonna hunt that closer piece.
Yeah, and it's still it's still not a bad piece. You got some areas that are better than others though. it's kind of, it's, and then that's when it comes, and then you just gotta, know your expectations going into your pieces though. In Ohio, we got a very diverse state with as far as like terrain and habitat and stuff goes.
Yeah.
So a certain county or general area of the state or a general piece, the caliber of deer can vary a lot. 140, 150 might be a lot more feasible in some of our areas than others, just due to the habitat.
Hunter pressure.
Yeah. You talk to the forester that is where your private land piece is at.
Yeah.
And he said a 125 is almost about as good as it gets.
Yeah, and if you that same piece, if you travel to the east, 20-minute drive, 15-minute drive,
you get a little bit more ag.
140, 150.
You get a little bit more ag. You get in that little bit mixture of a better, just better habitat. And exactly.
It's crazy. But the section my private piece is in, it's a big woodsy type. There's some strip mine, but there's no ag. There is no ag in that area. And he goes, dude, you kill a PNY to 135, you could be killing one of the better bucks in the area.
Yeah.
But